they warned her never to touch it. A single pot, Calabash, sealed for generations, said to carry a curse. But one moment of anger, one mistake, and she broke it. What came out changed her life and the entire village forever. The morning in Udugbe did not rush. It arrived like the Ebo River itself, soft, golden, patient. Palm trees leaned into the wind. Children's laughter rose, woven with the steady thud of pestles. Pounding yam. Goats trotted past mud compounds. The air carried the smoke of firewood and the faint sweetness of boiled cassava. In a small yard, shaded by a crooked pawpaw tree, lived Oba, a widowed fisherman, and his only child, Ivy. Her mother was gone to the ancestors when Ivy was barely 2. They said Oba's back broke into 2 pieces that day, one for grief and one for survival. He never remarried. Instead, he poured everything into his daughter, all his tenderness, all his steady strength. Ivy, he would call at dawn, his knuckle tapping her door. The river is up. Come and greet it before it sleeps again. And Ivy would roll from her mat, quick as a swallow, small, bright, with eyes like soaked cola. Dark, kind, a laugh that bounced like sunlight off water. By 9, she could balance a basin on her head and walk the bush paths without spilling a single drop. She cleaned fish with quick hands. She knew which net knot was sulking by the way it tugged against the current. And in the evenings, she sang to her father's boat as if it could hear, "Oh little canoe, carry our hope, carry our bread. When the river grows teeth, don't bite us, don't bite." Oba would listen, smiling softly, fingers tying ropes, fingers that had learned patience from years of tangled weeds and stubborn hooks. But one dry season brought a different kind of heat. Not the warmth of sun on skin, but the heat of hunger and humiliation. The river sank back from the bank, its mud opening in lines like old parched mouths. Nets came up thin, thin as a widow's pocket. What little fish they caught, they carried to the market, sold, for gari, for oil, and still, never enough. Whispers spread like smoke. The river spirits are offended. Someone has done what they should not. That same season, the potter shaped calabashes for the festival, butter yellow gourds carved with lines fine as spider silk. The finest of them all was Mama Ife's. Her hands could coax beauty from stubborn clay, and her eyes, they missed nothing. Her masterpiece gleamed on the shrine altar by the river, round, luminous, carved with fish so real they seemed ready to swim away. Water remembers, Mama Eve said. It carries what we pour into it, songs or curses. Guard what you pour. The words slid over Ivy like breeze. She was 12 then, quick to speak before she thought, quick to flare, slow to cool. That evening, the sky burned with sunset fire. After a quarrel at the stream, after laughter stung her ears like whips, Ivy stormed back toward the shrine. The festival calabash sat waiting, full to the neck with sacred water. The smaller gourd she reached for rolled, slipped, split in the mud. And from the path, the same mocking voice. Careful, market rat, don't break what your father can't pay for. A hard seed of fury cracked in Ivy's chest. She grabbed the sacred calabash, Mama Eve's perfect offering to the river, and in one rash moment, she flung it. It met the ground with a wooden cry. A seam split down its side, like lightning tearing the sky. Water bled out, hissing across the dry earth, vanishing into the cracks, like a secret swallowed by dust. The girls ran, but Ivy stood rooted, the broken calabash at her feet. Fear clawed her throat. She gathered the pieces, hid them behind shrine stones, and told no one. That night, the wind changed. The river pulled darkness over itself. Days became months. The river recovered, as rivers do, but something in Ivy's life did not. People no longer bought Oba's fish first. They bought from others, then came to him last, smiling with pity. Tomorrow, they said, but tomorrow slid away like water. Still, Ivy grew, work-hardened arms, laughter that refused to die. Suitors came, a schoolteacher with polished shoes, a farmer with a cart, a tailor whose trousers sat on the waist like a song. Ivy smiled and shook her head. Her heart was her compass. Then one market day, Osahon arrived, fresh from the city, a road contractor, with a Hilux that hummed like a giant mosquito. White shirts, untouched by smoke or fish scales. He bought fish without bargaining, carried crates for Ivy, greeted Oba with respect, and in his eyes, something unspoken. I see you. Time made room. Love found a path. Osahon asked with palm wine and kind words. He left envelopes of money, sacks of rice that filled the courtyard with neighbors' whispers. Ivy's laughter returned to the light. The wedding glowed beneath an almond tree, candles flickering in bottles. Drummers beat skins until the moon shook loose from clouds. Even the Igbo River whispered soft, as if pleased. Ivy followed Osahon to Lagos. Buildings stood like proud goats. Generators coughed all night. The house gleamed, tiles shining, curtains so heavy they could smother a storm. At first, she felt lifted into a brighter bowl, but a year passed. 2, 3. Doctors drew blood. Cold machines pressed against her belly. They shrugged. Try again, they said. Relax, they said, as if relaxation were medicine. Church elders prayed. Prophets shouted. Hope thinned into a rope she hid beneath her pillow. Osahon held her hand, but his mother, Madame Omote, did not hold her tongue. City wife, she hissed, where are your fruits? A tree with shade but no mango is a liar. Osahon's sisters snickered in corners. Neighbors threw words like stones. Barren, bad luck, village mistake. Ivy scrubbed floors that were already clean. She cooked soups that had no appetite waiting for them. Her laughter turned from a river to a trickle. On a night that smelled of diesel and old rain, Ivy called her father. She fought the steadiness in her voice and lost. Papa, she whispered, I am a well without water. Come home, Oba said. The road is wide for our feet. She returned to Udugbe with a bag half full and a heart too heavy for one chest. The village received her with the soft thrum of congas and the slap of hands against backs. Mama Ife shuffled from her workshop, eyes sharp, lips pressed into a thin line that could be a blessing or a blade. She hugged Ivy, her arms strong as bamboo. That night, Ivy, Oba, and Tosan, Ivy's little cousin, cheeky and faithful, sat in the courtyard. Fireflies stitched light into the dark. The Igbo flowed somewhere beyond the trees, the sound of a patient giant. The river has ears, Oba said, warming his hands around a cup. Tomorrow, we'll see Baba Agogo. Baba Agogo was not like other seers. He was a blind canoe carver with a scar that ran from his ear to the corner of his mouth, as if someone had mistakenly tried to draw a smile on him and given up. People said the river talked through him when it chose. People also said he told you only what you already knew but refused to admit. Both were often true. Morning came like a good secret. They walked through reeds to Baba Agogo's shed, where canoes slept on their sides, and the air smelled of camwood and river damp. He sat cross-legged, his hands sliding along a canoe's spine, finding places that needed smoothing. "You came with heavy water," he said before anyone spoke. Ivy swallowed. "Father," she began, using the way people addressed elders. I cannot." "Children," he said, nodding as if she had finished. He tilted his head, as if listening to a drum no one else could hear. "Some wombs are tied by rope, some by fear, some by memory." He turned his blind eyes toward the path. "You poured away a blessing once and cracked the bowl that held it." Ivy's bones went cold. Memory darted like a frightened fish. The calabash, the crack, the water spilling into thirsty earth. "I was a child," she said, voice torn thin, angry, stupid. "I broke the river's calabash." The river remembers," Baba Agogo said, echoing Mama Ife's old words. "But memory is not the end of the road. There is a ceremony for broken things." He touched the canoe, feeling its curve. "You must return what was spilled. Not with chicken, not with burial, but with water and truth." He gave instructions, simple and strange. "Go to Mama Ife and beg a new calabash, unfinished, raw, without paint or polish. Fill it with water from the Igbo at dawn, when the river is still half asleep and can hear apologies. Tie 3 palm fronds around the neck, one for anger, one for shame, one for silence. Sing a song of regret and name your anger aloud. Call it by what it did. Return to the shrine, set the calabash on the stone, and share the water. Some back to the earth you stole from, some to your head, some to your belly. Promise the river a thing you will do differently when the child comes." "Water keeps promises," he said. "So do lies. Choose which you will feed." They left the shed with hearts beating like talking drums. Tosan kept pace with Ivy, whispering nonsense jokes to keep her from cracking open. "Sister, if the river asks for dance, please don't do my 2 left feet. The ancestors are tired of my choreography." Even Ivy laughed, small and honest, and the night looked less like a wall. Mama Eve did not let Ivy kneel for long. She lifted her with hands that had delivered dozens of pots and 2 babies. "Child," she said, "the day you broke that calabash, the wind carried the sound to my bones. But shame kept silent, and shame grows mold. Today, we wash it." She reached behind and brought out a calabash, unlike any Ivy had seen. Light, pale, carved with waves and seeds, smooth but unfinished, as if it were listening for its purpose. "Take," Mama Ife said. "Return what was lost." Before dawn, Ivy bathed and tied a white wrapper. Oba and Tosan walked behind her, bare feet dusting the path. A heron flapped up from the reeds, annoyed at their trespass. The river yawned mist into the air. Ivy stepped to the bank and dipped the calabash. The water rose like it had been waiting. She drew it up, heavy and cool. Palm fronds rustled around the neck as she tied them, her fingers remembering her mother's old knots. Then she sang. It was not a pretty song. It was a true one, cracked, wet, and human. River, I broke your bowl. I poured your face on the ground. My anger was bigger than my sense. Forgive my hands, teach my heart. Where I was harsh, make me soft. Where I was quick, make me slow. Water, carry my child when the time is right. Her voice shook. Words snagged in her teeth and came out anyway. Oba stood with his head bent. Tosin wept openly, which made a frog somewhere croak in protest. At the shrine, Ivy set the calabash on the flat stone. She poured some water gently on the earth where the old one had cracked, and the dust drank it without fuss. She cupped some water in her palm, poured it over her head. Then she lifted a handful to her belly, cool and shocking, and whispered, "Come when you are ready. I will wait without anger." The wind exhaled down the river. The palm leaves trembled. A tiny wave licked the bank like a cat. No thunder, no lightning, just a quiet that felt like a door, clicking softly open somewhere no one could see. Back in Abudu City, life still had teeth. Madame Omote raised her eyebrows when Ivy returned. "So the village washed you," she said, voice sweet as burnt sugar. "We shall see if the river knows city roads." Osahon held Ivy tighter. He had no words, and sometimes that was a blessing. A month passed. 2. Ivy's body hummed with a different rhythm. Scents pricked her nose like thieves, kerosene, smoke, fried plantains. She found herself standing in the kitchen in the afternoon, hand against her belly, tears tracking down her cheeks, and not knowing why. She went to the clinic. The nurse looked up, then looked again. "You came last month, right? Let me, please sit." The test strained time like a drum skin. When the nurse returned, her smile was a sunrise. "My sister," she said, "you are carrying." Ivy blinked. The ceiling moved. She took the paper, pressing it to her chest, as if the ink would bleed into her skin and write a new story there. Osahon came running from the parking lot when she called him. He slipped on the polished floor, slid into the wall, and laughed like a boy. He wept into her neck and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on us." Even Madame Omote held her tongue for 2 whole weeks. Pregnancy turned Ivy's world into a small universe of careful steps. She listened to rivers on YouTube at night, pretending they were Igbo's voice. She put the calabash from Mama Ife on a shelf and kept flowers in it sometimes, then emptied it, washed it, and sang the apology song like a lullaby. 9 months arrived with rain. Labor came with the kind of pain that has its own language. The midwife said, "Breathe." Ivy breathed and then forgot how, and then remembered. Osahon held her hand while her fingers clawed roads into his skin. Storm clouds gathered. The generator coughed and died. The room went dim. The midwife frowned. The baby turned stubborn. The heart monitor stuttered like a gossip. There was talk of a transfer and no ambulance, and a road that had become a river itself. Then, in the doorway, someone appeared. Mama Ife. How she had come from Udugbe through rain like teeth, no one could later explain. Lifted the calabash and said, "Sing." "I can't," Ivy groaned. "Sing," Mama Ife repeated, voice like a paddle cutting water. Ivy sang, ragged, low, the same words she had offered to the river. As she sang, Mama Eve poured a trickle of water from the calabash into Ivy's palms. Ivy rubbed the wet into her belly, into her face. The midwife said, don't pour. And then paused, eyes wide, because the heartbeat steadied, and the baby turned, and the world, just for a second, clicked back into place. A cry split the storm's mouth. A daughter landed in the world, furious and perfect, still slippery with work. She was set on Ivy's chest, and Ivy said, You came. I will not pour you away. Never. They named her Ofuo, peace after trouble. Word moves like water. Udugbe danced. Abudu's church bells clanged against mosque calls. Hawkers shouted her name between calls for suya and recharge cards. Madame Omote held the baby and did not call her a mango tree or a shadow. She said only, quietly, welcome. Time took up its old work, but with new tenderness. Ofuo grew, and Ivy's house learned laughter again, the kind that holds gratitude in its teeth. Osahon became soft in places he hadn't known were hard. Tosan visited often and made the baby giggle until she hiccuped like a drummer with hiccups. One evening, Ivy returned to Udugbe with Ofure, now a year old. The Ebo River shone like a long coin. They went to the shrine. The unfinished calabash sat on the stone. The palm fronds long dried to bony green. The carvings of waves now softly worn. Ivy lifted her daughter to see. This is where your mother remembered how to apologize, she told her. This is where water taught me that anger is a thief. Mama Ifa shuffled from the path, carrying a small new calabash. She pressed it into Ofuo's tiny hands. For your own promises, she said, keep it safe. Water listens. Years later, Udugbe still told Ivy's story, but not as gossip, as a lesson. Not every woman's struggle is a curse. Not every curse is permanent. Not every miracle is loud. Sometimes the river just returns what you were finally brave enough to ask for properly. And if you walk along the Ebo at sunrise, you might hear a melody, an apology turned lullaby, a memory turned blessing. River, I broke your bowl, but you gave me one more. I will pour care this time, and keep what you keep. Have you ever done something in a moment of anger that looked small, but later you realized it carried a heavy consequence? What promise can you make today to pour back something good where you once poured harm? Water remembers. What we pour into life, anger or kindness, always returns to us in a different shape. Respect sacred things, practice patience, speak truth, and when you fail, apologize with action. The earth, like the river, often forgives those who repair what they broke. If this story moved you, please like the video to push it to more hearts. Share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to African Tales by Nina for more stories that heal, reveal, and inspire. I'll be back with another unforgettable story. Until then, stay blessed.